I watched the live feed from my doorbell camera in pure disbelief. It wasn't a masked burglar trying to pry open my front door. It was a local locksmith, and standing right behind him, directing traffic with a stack of boxes, were my parents and my estranged younger sister. I bought my first house in the Denver suburbs at 28. It wasn't a mansion, just a modest 3-bedroom ranch on Elmwood Drive with a wraparound porch and a kitchen that desperately needed updating. But it was mine. Every dollar of the down payment came from years of skipping vacations, working 60-hour weeks at a logistics firm, and obsessively tracking my budget. My name, Catherine Barrett, was the only one on the deed. That distinction is important, because in my family, boundaries were treated as mere suggestions, especially when it came to my younger sister, Savannah. Savannah is 25 and the undisputed golden child of the Barrett family. While I was expected to figure life out on my own, my parents, Ricky and Martha, hovered over Savannah with an open checkbook and endless excuses. When she dropped out of college, she just needed time to find her passion. When she totaled her car, the intersection was notoriously confusing. And when she got evicted from her last 3 apartments for failing to pay rent despite having a trust fund my grandparents left us, it was always the landlord's fault. I had invited my parents over for a Sunday roast to celebrate my first month in the new house. I spent all afternoon cooking, hoping for once we could just have a normal, drama-free evening. I should have known better. The tension started the moment my mother walked through the door. She didn't congratulate me. Instead, she ran a critical finger over the entryway console table and sighed. "It's a bit far from the city, isn't it, Catherine?" Martha murmured, taking off her coat. "And 3 bedrooms for a single woman? It seems excessive." "It's an investment, Mom," I replied, forcing a smile as I took my dad's jacket. "Plus, I need the home office." We sat down for dinner, the clinking of silverware filling the awkward silence. My dad cleared his throat, pushing his plate away. "Actually, Catherine, about those extra bedrooms, your mother and I want to talk to you about a family matter." My stomach immediately plummeted. The family matter tone only ever meant one thing. "Savannah. Savannah's lease is up at the end of the month," my mother chimed in, leaning forward with a tight, practiced smile. "The landlord is being completely unreasonable about renewing it. He wants a 6-month advance, which is just extortion." "She hasn't paid rent in 3 months, Mum," I said flatly, having already heard the rumors from a mutual friend. "That's not extortion. That's a business protecting itself." "Don't speak about your sister that way," my dad snapped, his face reddening. "She's going through a rough patch. Toby just lost his job at the dealership, so things are tight." Toby. Savannah's boyfriend of 8 months. A guy who wore sunglasses indoors, had a rap sheet for petty theft, and spoke to my sister like she was a nuisance he couldn't quite shake. The thought of him made my blood boil. "Well, I hope they find a place that suits their budget," I said, taking a sip of water. I tried to pivot. "How is Aunt Sarah doing, by the way?" My mother ignored the pivot entirely. She reached across the table and patted my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "We've already solved it, sweetie. We told Savannah she's moving in here with you. You have 2 empty rooms. It's perfect. You can use the company, and she can save up some money until she gets back on her feet." The room went dead silent. I stared at my mother, waiting for the punchline, but her expression was completely serious. My father was already nodding, looking around the dining room as if he were mentally placing Savannah's furniture. "No," I said quietly. My mother blinked. "What do you mean, no?" "It makes perfect sense. I mean absolutely, unequivocally, no. Savannah is not moving into my house." The temperature in the room plummeted. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the wine glasses rattle. "Catherine Barrett, you will not turn your back on your own flesh and blood. You have a massive house sitting empty while your sister is practically out on the street." "She is not out on the street," I shot back, my heart hammering against my ribs. "She has you two. She can move back into your basement. She's not moving in here. She steals my things. She brings around shady people. and she expects everyone else to clean up her messes. This is my sanctuary. I bought it, I pay the mortgage, and my answer is no. We raised you better than this, my mother hissed, tears welling in her eyes, her favorite weapon. Family helps family. We told her she could have the room with the ensuite bathroom. She's already started packing. Then she can unpack, I said, standing up from the table. My hands were shaking, but my voice was cold and steady. I am not taking on Savannah's responsibilities, and I am horrified that you would offer up my home without even asking me. The fight escalated from there. Insults were thrown. Guilt trips were laid on thick. My father called me selfish and ungrateful. My mother sobbed that I was tearing the family apart. Finally, realizing I wasn't going to budge, they grabbed their coats and stormed out. "You'll regret this, Catherine," my dad spat as he walked out the front door. "When you need us, remember this moment." I locked the deadbolt behind them, leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, and let out a long, shuddering breath. I thought I had set a firm boundary. I thought the worst of it was over. I was incredibly naive. 5 days passed. The fallout from the dinner was predictable. A barrage of passive-aggressive texts from my mother, a voicemail from my father demanding an apology, and a slew of social media posts from Savannah about toxic siblings and choosing your own family. I muted their notifications, focusing instead on a massive marketing campaign I was launching at work. It was Friday afternoon. I was in the middle of our downtown office, standing at the head of a glass-walled conference room, presenting my Q3 strategy to the executive board. My phone was resting face up on the podium, set to silent. Suddenly, the screen lit up. A push notification from my home security app flashed across the lock screen. Alert. Motion detected at driveway. I ignored it. Probably the mail carrier or a neighborhood cat. I flipped to the next slide in my presentation. 10 seconds later, the screen lit up again. Alert. Motion detected at front porch. Followed immediately by alert. Person detected at front door. A knot formed in my stomach. I paused my presentation, offering a tight smile to the VP of marketing. "Just one moment, everyone. I apologize. I need to check a security alert on my property." I tapped the notification, bringing up the live 4K feed from my porch camera. The color drained from my face. Parked in my driveway was my dad's silver Chevy Tahoe. Behind it was a beat-up U-Haul trailer, and standing on my front porch, holding a large cardboard box labeled Savannah's Clothes, was Toby. But that wasn't what made my breath catch in my throat. Standing directly in front of my heavy oak door was a man in a blue work shirt, holding a power drill. My dad was standing next to him, pointing at the deadbolt. They were drilling my locks. Pure adrenaline flooded my system. I didn't care that I was in the middle of the most important meeting of my career. I tapped the microphone icon on the app, routing my voice through the two-way speaker on the porch camera. "What the hell are you doing?" My voice boomed from the porch speaker, echoing slightly over the app's audio feed. On the screen, my dad jumped backward, clutching his chest. Toby dropped the box of clothes, spilling a tangle of sweaters onto my concrete porch. The locksmith immediately pulled the drill away from the door. Looking around in confusion, "Catherine?" my dad said, peering up at the camera lens, his face a mix of shock and defiance. "Dad, get off my porch right now," I demanded, my hands shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. "Who is that man with the drill?" My mother stepped into the frame, her arms crossed defensively. "Catherine, calm down. You're being hysterical. We knew you just needed time to cool off after Sunday. Savannah has to be out of her place today. We hired a locksmith to let us in so we could get her settled before you got home from work. It was supposed to be a surprise." "A surprise?" I practically screamed into the phone. The executives in the boardroom were now staring at me in stunned silence, but I was too panicked to care. "That is breaking and entering. You are breaking into my house." "Ma'am?" The locksmith leaned toward the camera, looking incredibly uncomfortable. "I was told by this gentleman that he owned the property and had lost the keys." "He lied to you," I yelled. My name is Catherine Barrett, and I am the sole owner of that house. If you drill that lock, I will press charges against you and your company for burglary. The locksmith's eyes went wide. He immediately stepped back from the door and started packing his tools into his bag. I'm out. I don't get involved in domestic disputes. Wait, my dad barked, grabbing the locksmith's arm. I am her father. I'm authorizing you to open this door. Don't touch me, man. The locksmith snapped, yanking his arm away. He turned and practically jogged toward his service van parked on the street. Catherine, stop this nonsense right now, my mother shouted at the camera. Savannah finally strolled into the frame, chewing gum, looking completely unbothered. Geez, Catherine, stop being such a psycho, Savannah whined, rolling her eyes at the lens. I already told my landlord I was out. My stuff is in the trailer. Just unlock the door remotely. We know you have the smart lock. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The sheer entitlement, the absolute disregard for my property, my safety, my life. They had planned this. They waited until they knew I would be at work, hired a professional to bypass my security, and intended to squat in my house so that I wouldn't be able to legally kick them out once they established residency. I am not unlocking anything, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper. You have exactly 3 minutes to get off my property, or I am calling the police. You wouldn't dare call the cops on your own family, my dad sneered, stepping right up to the camera so his red, angry face filled my phone screen. We are staying right here until you get home and open this door. You are acting like a spoiled brat. I didn't say another word. I disconnected the microphone, closed the security app, and immediately dialed 911, Denver Police Dispatch. What is your emergency? A calm voice answered. My name is Catherine Barrett, I said, grabbing my blazer and laptop bag. There is a group of people attempting to break into my home at 442 Elmwood Drive. They have a U-Haul, and they just tried to hire a locksmith to drill my front door. I have it all on video. Are you inside the residence, ma'am? No, I'm at work downtown. But I'm leaving right now. Please, you need to send someone. They are refusing to leave the property. We have officers in the area. I'm dispatching a unit now. Do you know the individuals attempting entry? I swallowed hard, the reality of what was happening crashing down on me. Yes. I hung up, looked at the bewildered faces of my company's board members, and offered a frantic apology before sprinting out of the conference room. The drive from downtown Denver to my suburb usually took 40 minutes. I made it in 25, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, my phone buzzing incessantly in the cup holder with calls from my mother. As I turned onto Elmwood Drive, my heart leaped into my throat. The U-Haul was still there. My dad's Tahoe was still there, but flashing red and blue lights illuminated the front of my house. 2 police cruisers were parked at angled blocks across my driveway, and as I threw my car into park and leaped out, I saw my father, red-faced and screaming, being pushed back against the hood of a police cruiser by an officer. But the true horror wasn't my father's arrest. It was Toby, standing by the side of my house, holding a brick, with the shattered remains of my dining room window scattered across the grass. The sound of my car door slamming echoed through the quiet suburban street, but it was drowned out by the shouting. I didn't even look at the police officers. My eyes were locked on the jagged hole in my dining room window. Shards of double-pane glass glistened on the mulch like spilled diamonds, and the sheer white curtains I'd picked out with such pride were fluttering in the breeze, snagged on the sharp edges of the frame. He broke my window! I screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Toby. Toby, usually so smug, looked pale. The brick was still lying near his feet. It was an accident. I was just trying to get their attention inside. Inside. No one is inside, I yelled, closing the distance. An officer, a tall man with a nameplate that read Officer Miller, stepped between us, his hand hovering near his utility belt. Ma'am, stay back, Miller commanded. Is this your residence? Yes, I'm Catherine Barrett. I called 911. I have the deed in my car and the security footage on my phone. My father, Ricky, was currently being held against the hood of the second cruiser by a younger female officer. Catherine, tell them to let me go. This is a family matter. We were just trying to help your sister move in. We thought you lost your keys. He lied to the locksmith. Officer, I said, my voice cracking. And when the locksmith refused to break in, they decided to smash their way in. We did not, my mother, Martha, wailed from the porch steps. She was sitting there, clutching her designer handbag as if it were a shield. Toby was he tripped. He had the brick to prop the door open. A brick to prop a door that was locked? Officer Miller asked, his eyebrow arched in disbelief. He turned to his partner. Check the guy with the brick for ID and get the father's statement recorded. Savannah was leaning against the U-Haul, scrolling on her phone as if this were a minor inconvenience at a Starbucks. She looked up, her eyes cold. You're really doing this, Catherine? You're calling the cops on Dad? Over a window? God, you've always been so dramatic. Just let us in so we can unload the couch. It's starting to drizzle. I stared at her. The utter lack of remorse, the vacuum of empathy, it was staggering. Savannah, you are never stepping foot in this house. Not today, not ever. Get your junk off my driveway. Make me, she smirked. The situation spiraled. As Officer Miller began questioning my father, Ricky's temper, the same temper I had feared as a child, flared. He tried to shove past the officer to get to me. You ungrateful little brat, he roared. After everything we did for you, we paid for your braces. We let you live in our house until you were 22, and I paid you rent every single month of those 4 years. I shouted back. Unlike her. That's enough, Officer Miller barked. Mr. Barrett, you are under arrest for disorderly conduct and attempted forced entry. Turn around and put your hands behind your back. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound I had ever heard. My mother let out a literal shriek, rushing forward only to be blocked by the other officer. You're arresting him? For visiting his daughter? Martha cried. This is a mistake. Catherine, tell them. Tell them it's a mistake. I looked at my father, his face purple with rage, and then at my mother, whose face was twisted in a mask of betrayal. Finally, I looked at the broken window of my dream home. It's not a mistake, I said, my heart feeling like it was being squeezed by a cold hand. Officer, I want to file a full report. I want to press charges for the property damage. And I want a formal trespass warning issued to all 4 of them. The next hour was a blur of paperwork and bitter departures. Because my father had resisted and Toby had actually destroyed property, they were both taken down to the station. My mother, forced to drive the U-Haul herself since Savannah didn't do trailers, screamed at me the entire time she was unhooking the hitch. You've lost your family today, Catherine, she screamed as she pulled away, the tires screeching. Don't you ever call us? Don't you ever come home for Christmas? You're dead to us. I stood in my driveway, the evening chill seeping into my bones, and watched their taillights disappear. The silence that followed was heavy. I was alone in my sanctuary, and it was broken. 2 weeks later, the physical damage was repaired. The window was replaced, and I had installed additional motion sensor floodlights and a secondary deadbolt. But the internal damage was festering. I was officially the villain. My extended family aunts I hadn't spoken to in years, cousins in Ohio, started blowing up my phone. My mother had spun a masterpiece of a lie. Catherine lured us over, promised Savannah a place to stay, and then called the police to have her own father arrested for a misunderstanding about a key. I was sitting in my living room, nursing a glass of wine and staring at the no trespassing sign I'd subtly tucked into my flower bed when my doorbell rang. My heart skipped. I checked the camera. It wasn't my parents. It was a courier. I opened the door to find a thick envelope. It was a legal summons. My parents were suing me, not for the trauma of the arrest, but for breach of verbal contract and unjust enrichment. I took the papers to a lawyer the next morning. Mark Stevenson, a shark of a property attorney, flipped through the pages with a grimace. "They're claiming," Mark said, leaning back in his leather chair, "that when you bought this house, you used $50,000 of family funds given to you with the explicit verbal agreement that it would serve as a multi-generational home. They're saying you took their money to buy the house with the promise that Savannah would always have a suite there." I felt the room spin. That's a lie. A total, complete lie. I saved that money myself. My bank statements prove it. "They have a document, Catherine," Mark said, sliding a photocopy across the desk. I looked at it. It was a gift letter, a standard form used during mortgage applications to prove that a large sum of money is a gift, not a loan. It was dated from 6 months ago. It bore my signature and my father's signature, stating he had gifted me $50,000 for the down payment. "I never signed this," I whispered. "I didn't need a gift letter. My down payment was $62,000, all from my high-yield savings account. If this is forged, we can prove it," Mark said. "But they've also filed for an emergency injunction to allow Savannah to move in immediately while the ownership of the house is litigated, claiming she is a displaced resident." I felt sick. They weren't just trying to move her in. They were trying to steal my house. They were using a forged document to claim they had an equity stake in my life. That night, I didn't sleep. I went through every digital file I had. I dug through my old emails, my tax returns, and my bank logs. And then, I found it. A year ago, I had let my father use my old laptop while his was being repaired. I had forgotten that my Chrome browser was synced. He had access to my passwords, my digital signature, and my banking portals for 3 weeks. But he was sloppy. I found a deleted folder in my cloud storage. In it were several drafts of the forged gift letter. He had been practicing my signature using a stylus on a tablet. There were also emails he had sent to himself from my account emails I never wrote, discussing the deal for Savannah's room. But the real twist came when I looked at the metadata of the final forged document. The digital signature hadn't been created by my father. It had been created by Toby. Toby, who worked at a car dealership and knew exactly how to manipulate digital titles and loan documents. I didn't just have a family dispute. I had a conspiracy. I spent the rest of the night compiling a war room file. I pulled the logs from the day the gift letter was supposedly signed. On that date, I wasn't even in Denver. I was in Chicago for a conference. I had receipts, flight logs, and photos of me at a keynote speech at the exact time my father claimed we were signing papers at his kitchen table. The next morning, I didn't call my parents. I called the detective who had handled the 911 call. "Detective? This is Catherine Barrett. You remember the attempted break-in on Elmwood? It's gotten much bigger. I have evidence of identity theft, mortgage fraud, and a conspiracy to commit grand larceny." I felt a strange, cold clarity. The woman who had cried on her porch 2 weeks ago was gone. My parents had decided to treat my life like a resource to be mined for Savannah's comfort. They thought because I was the responsible one, I would eventually fold to keep the peace. They forgot one thing. I was the responsible one because I knew how to build a case. I spent the afternoon at the bank. I sat down with the branch manager, a stern woman named Mrs. Gable. When I showed her the forged gift letter and my actual account history, her face went white. "This wasn't just used for your parents' lawsuit, Miss Barrett," she said, her voice low. "What do you mean?" "This document was used 3 months ago to secure a personal loan in your name. A $40,000 home improvement loan. The funds were wired to an account held by a Ricky and Savannah Barrett." I fell back into the chair. They hadn't just tried to move her in. They had already stolen $40,000 from my future. They had used my house, my sweat and blood, as collateral for Savannah's lifestyle. "I want to report a fraud," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "And I want to see the video of whoever showed up at the branch to verify that loan." Mrs. Gable pulled up the security footage from November 14th. There she was, Savannah, wearing a wig that matched my hair color, holding a fake ID, and laughing with Toby as they walked out of the bank with my money. The trap was set. Now, I just had to spring it. The Denver County Courthouse was a cold, imposing structure of granite and glass that felt more like a tomb than a hall of justice. I sat on a hard wooden bench in the hallway, my hands folded neatly over a manila folder that contained the destruction of my family. I had traded my casual work blazer for a sharp, charcoal grey suit. I didn't want to look like a victim. I wanted to look like an executioner. Mark Stevenson sat beside me, checking his watch. "They're here," he whispered. I looked up. The elevators had just opened, and the Barrett family parade began. My father, Ricky, led the way, his chest puffed out with a false sense of righteousness. My mother, Martha, walked beside him, clutching a lace handkerchief as if she were attending a funeral. Behind them were the stars of the show. Savannah, wearing a modest floral dress that screamed innocent girl, and Toby, who had actually managed to tuck his shirt in for once. They saw me, and for a second, Savannah's smirk faltered. But Ricky just glared, leaning down to whisper something to their lawyer. A man named Henderson, who looked like he'd bought his suit at a discount warehouse. "Remember, Catherine," Mark whispered. "Let them lie first. The higher they climb, the harder they hit the pavement." We were called into courtroom 4B. Judge Sarah Vance. No, wait. Let's call her Judge Margaret Reynolds, sat behind the bench, looking like she had zero patience for domestic squabbles. "This is a hearing for an emergency injunction regarding the property at 442 Elmwood Drive," Judge Reynolds announced, her voice echoing. "Mr. Henderson." "Proceed." Henderson stood up, clearing his throat. "Your Honor, my clients, Ricky and Martha Barrett, provided a $50,000 gift to their daughter, Catherine, to secure this home. This was done with a clear, verbal, and documented understanding that the home would serve as a safety net for the family, specifically for the younger daughter, Savannah, who is currently facing homelessness due to the petitioner's sudden and malicious change of heart. We have the signed gift letter and various email correspondences confirming this intent." He handed the forged document to the bailiff. I watched as the judge scanned the paper that Toby had meticulously faked, the paper my father had used to try and steal my equity. "And where is Savannah Barrett currently residing?" "In a motel, Your Honor," Martha chimed in, her voice trembling with practiced grief. "It's heartbreaking. Her own sister is living in a 3-bedroom house while Savannah is in a dangerous part of town, all because Catherine decided to turn her back on us the moment she got the deed in her name." The judge turned to Mark. "Mr. Stevenson, your response." Mark stood up slowly, adjusting his glasses. "Your Honor, we aren't just contesting the injunction. We are contesting the validity of every piece of evidence presented by the opposition. In fact, we'd like to present a few documents of our own." He walked toward the bench, laying out a series of color-coded exhibits. "Exhibit A," Mark began, his voice gaining strength. "A certified travel log and hotel receipt from the Palmer House in Chicago. On the date this gift letter was allegedly signed in person in Denver, my client was 300 miles away, giving a presentation to 400 people. We have the video of that presentation. I saw my father's jaw tighten. He glanced at Toby, who suddenly seemed very interested in his own fingernails. Exhibit B," Mark continued, "is a metadata analysis of the digital signature used on this letter. It was not created by Catherine Barrett. It was created on a device registered to a Mr. Toby Riggs from an IP address linked to the car dealership where he is employed." "That's a lie!" Ricky shouted, standing up. "She's hacking us! She's trying to frame him!" "Sit down, Mr. Barrett," Judge Reynolds warned, her eyes flashing. "But it gets worse." "Your Honor," Mark said, his voice dropping to a deadly quiet. "We aren't just talking about a house anymore. We are talking about $40,000. Mrs. Gable, the manager of First National Bank, is waiting in the hallway to testify. She has security footage from November 14th showing Savannah Barrett wearing a blonde wig and carrying a forged ID in Catherine's name, withdrawing a $40,000 home equity loan, a loan secured using the very same forged gift letter presented to this court today. The silence in the room was absolute. I looked at Savannah. The color had drained from her face, leaving her looking sickly and small. Martha was staring at her daughter, her mouth hanging open in a silent O of horror. She hadn't known about the money. Ricky, however, didn't look surprised. He looked terrified. He had been in on it. "Your Honor," Mark said, turning to the back of the room. "We have also invited Detective Sarah Jenkins from the Fraud Division. She is currently outside with 2 warrants." The doors to the courtroom swung open. It wasn't just the detective. It was the reality of their choices finally catching up to them. Savannah stood up, her chair screeching against the floor. "Catherine, wait! It was Toby's idea. He said you wouldn't even notice the payments. You have so much money. And I had nothing." "You had a sister who would have done anything for you," I said, speaking for the first time. My voice didn't shake. "But you chose to treat me like an ATM. You chose to try and take the roof over my head." The detective stepped forward, and the next few minutes were a chaotic blur of, "You have the right to remain silent." Savannah was sobbing, her makeup running in dark streaks down her face as she was handcuffed. Toby tried to bolt for the side door, but the bailiff tackled him before he made it 5 feet. Ricky was screaming at me, his face a terrifying shade of purple. "You've destroyed this family. You've put your own sister in jail. I hope you rot in that house alone." "I won't be alone, Dad," I said, watching as they led him away for his role in the mortgage fraud. "I'll finally have some peace and quiet." Martha was the last to leave. She wasn't arrested. There was no evidence she'd known about the $40,000, but she was broken. She looked at me, her eyes searching for the daughter who used to apologize for things she didn't do just to keep the peace. "How could you do this to us?" she whispered. "I didn't do this to you, Mum," I replied, gathering my files. "You did this to me. I just stopped letting you." I walked out of that courthouse and drove back to Elmwood Drive. I sat on my wraparound porch for a long time, watching the sun dip behind the Rockies. My phone was buzzing with messages from relatives who had suddenly found out the truth and were now offering their support. I deleted them all. I went inside, locked my new, undrillable deadbolt, and checked my security app one last time. Status: all zones secure. For the first time in my life, it was true. Cutting ties with my family wasn't the tragedy I thought it would be. It was the ultimate liberation. My home is no longer a target. It is a sanctuary built on the truth they tried so hard to bury. Savannah and Toby are facing years of legal fallout, and my parents are learning that blood isn't a license to steal. I finally have the one thing money can't buy: a life without looking over my shoulder.